Welcome back to the Dynasty Locker Room. In this episode, we're going to touch on our top 300 fantasy baseball rankings. I'm your host, Nation, and with me again today, I got Tessmonster and Tyler. Tyler, what have you been up to? Long time no talk.
Yeah, it's been a while. I honestly just been continuing with my boom and bust articles, just trying to, wrap that up. I got NL East. I need to do an AL Central, so I'm excited to wrap those up before the season starts here. So I should have, the NL East bus coming out here this weekend / beginning of next week. So pretty excited about that. And then I'm still working on my top 10 prospects that you might not have heard of. Unfortunately, there's been a little bit delay, so I haven't gotten that out on time like I was wanting to. But I'm excited, to finish those 5 articles here before the start of the season. And then I'm going to be doing a free agent top 10 pickups, on a weekly basis of guys you can target that most likely aren't rostered in your league. So really excited for baseball season to start because I'm just ready to sit here and talk about actually what's happening instead of what could happen. So that's what I got. How about you, Tessmonster?
Yeah, I know Nation said long time no talk, and I find myself wishing you didn't talk more often. I've been working on rounding out the tour of the divisions in baseball for their prospects. So we just finalized it today with the NL West top 15 prospects. So excited to get that done and looking forward to what they can all do this season in baseball. Looking forward to opening day and seeing which prospects are going to break camp. Looking forward to some fun stories as we go on throughout the season. But boys, the last time the three of us were on a podcast, we had no baseball, and here we are. So it's a great day.
Yeah, it's definitely nice to have baseball back here, that we have spring training going. It was only, seems like yesterday we were discussing when spring training was going to happen, and now that the games are being played, that means there's a shot bet to be paid, isn't there, Tessmonster?
Woo, baby!
Unfortunate that you had to win that by 1 day over me, and shocking nobody, Tyler was the farthest off with the first pick. But I guess a shot's a shot. Time to pay that up.
I might have been farthest off, but the day I picked was the day they came to agree on continuing, their agreement and start the league. So I'll take a second place here, but I'll take this tequila shot. So Tessmonster, here's to you. Unfortunately, being right too often.
Thank you.
Not
very painful there, Tyler.
Yeah, there's no chaser, no training wheels on that tequila.
Well, now that the shot bet's paid and baseball's back, let's talk about some of those big free agent signings that have happened since we last spoke about some of those options. And the biggest one of the guys close to my heart for my fantasy team for the last few years, Trevor Story. Tessman, tell us what you like about Trevor Story landing in Boston there.
Yeah, this was a really one to monitor throughout the offseason. Well, at least certainly when baseball came back, because you heard all the rumors of everybody who was quote unquote wooing him. And, you heard for a long time that he didn't want to move off of shortstop. He wasn't going to sign anywhere. You heard him even talking to the Twins, and a lot of people thought that was going to be a thing after they cleared all that cap space. But here he is in Boston, and man, a lot of people have been talking about some of the best infields in baseball, and it's hard not to think he's going to be a part of that in Boston with him and Devers and Bogarts and whoever they end up putting at first base. It's not going to be Tristan Casas, Tyler. So
maybe not now.
This is going to make for a really fun lineup to watch, and as much as I was hoping for Toronto and Tampa Bay to make strides ahead of both them and the Yankees, it's going to be a true 4-team race now, and that might make it even more fun to watch for me.
Yeah, I think with the signing of Story in Boston, I saw the probabilities of the teams in the AL East there making the playoffs, and those 4 teams were at about 60% or higher. So that's going to be a big race to see who wins that division, see if any of them, instead of fighting each other, if any of them are able to actually get to that first round bye this year. It'll definitely be a fun race to watch, and definitely a good place for Story in his fantasy landscape of being able to hit between or ahead of Bogarts and Devers there. So that'll be a good landing spot. Definitely really excited about him signing there from my team's perspective. But you mentioned the Minnesota Twins, and they made that splash with Carlos Correa. Tyler, what about him landing in the Twins? You like it? You hate it?
On a previous podcast with Tessmonster, I mentioned how the Twins probably wouldn't be making much of a splash, and at that point they hadn't. And all of a sudden, they get Sonny Gray in a trade, and they go get Correa and trade with the Yankees on Sanchez and Urshela. And, all of a sudden the Twins are making a splash, and this Correa signing, I think, was the next person they really needed to be relevant in that division. I mean, obviously the White Sox are your top tier dog there, and Tigers are, I think one of the top 5 teams to spend this offseason. And, here come the Twins. So I'm not a huge Twins fan. I'm very happy for this small market franchise, though, to show their fans that they're very serious. I think when you look at Urshela, who puts up usually a pretty good average, Correa at shortstop, defensively and offensively, he's going to make a huge dent in that lineup. Between him and Polanco, short and second, I think that's a great middle infield that they're going to, put out there. I still think the Twins are one pitcher shy of really, being relevant to compete with the White Sox. But, I think there's going to be a lot of people tuning in, and I'm not a Twins fan, but very, very proud for all these fans in this market to see the Twins make a splash there.
And I definitely agree with you that we're, a pitcher short. But the rumors of them going after one of the Frankie or Manea over in Oakland, which again, Oakland, I think I just saw that they have yet to spend $1 in free agency, which is mind-blowing to me. But bringing one of them, that team can definitely be really exciting. I know I'll be at a lot of games regardless with the Tessmonster, and Tyler might even tag along for some of the beers there at Target Field.
Yeah, we got to go 999 again.
999 is an aggressive day for everyone at the ballpark, but always a target to hit. Tessmonster, Chris Bryant, I know you put him on here. Tell us about him. Do you like his landing spot?
Yeah, this might be the most interesting one to me of all. I mean, we've seen Chris Bryant play in a lot of places over the years, and usually it's been a contender. So it was kind of surprising to see Colorado kind of go after him, woo him, especially with really nobody in place there after Story's gone. And, we've talked previously about how they've been reluctant to call up prospects, and now they've got Brendan Rodgers up, but nobody else really around him other than Ryan McMahon. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I was kind of wondering to myself aloud, now that he's got all of these, he's got a World Series, he's got an MVP, he's got accolades. Is he going legacy hunting? Is he going to try and pop a bunch of home runs at Coors Field? I don't know. This was definitely the most perplexing of all, but it's hard not to like what it's going to do for his home run category in Roto for sure.
It's definitely one of those confusing ones to me. Like you mentioned, they didn't want to sign Story. Whatever they did with Arenado, giving him away basically for free, and then going to spend a bunch of money on Chris Bryant. Again, one of those things that doesn't quite make sense in the makeup of.
Are you saying roster. You don't think Austin Gomber was a fair return?
Austin Gomber and taking like all of his salary. Yeah, I'm not an MLB GM, obviously, and I don't know anything about that, but I know I wouldn't have taken that deal in my fantasy team. That's for sure. But now going over to the Phillies, they've been making some moves. They were lacking a little bit last year. I mean, Bryce Harper had his huge year last year and was kind of let down by everyone in the lineup around him. And they go out and get Castellanos and Schwarber. What do you got going on over here, Tyler?
I think they were very interesting signings for a team that, between Zach Wheeler, Nola, Suarez, even Kyle Gibson joining them with Zach Eflin rounding that pitching rotation. I thought, the one thing lacking was their lineup. And to add, Castellanos and then Schwarber potentially most likely in that DH role, I really think the Phillies jumped up as a big sleeper in that National League Conference. I really see them, probably one of the top 3 teams over there now, mirroring the Dodgers and Mets. I mean, you look at that lineup. I mean, Alec Bohm, although, albeit he had a rough 2021 season, there's a lot to be like there. That third base, you know, Rhys Hoskins at first base, JT Realmuto still behind the plate. That lineup, it's hard to say. It might not be I mean, there's no way it's not a top 5 lineup now. So I think that was 2 huge pieces that they needed to round out their team to be a contender. And, you know, that's my new sleeper pick in the NL now with the Dodgers and Mets being at the top.
I know with me having Bryce Harper on my team last year and seeing him hit 309, hit 35 home runs, but fail to even get 85 RBIs because nobody was doing anything around him, makes me really excited for his draft prospects and his full season projection coming into this year now with a couple more hitters around him and hopefully everyone else bulking up. Can't disagree with you on how good that lineup's going to be this year. And this could be a team that in the fantasy world, you want to buy some of these shares coming in here with you have 3, 4, 5 hitters that can really have a chance for 90, 90, 95, 95 in your runs and RBIs going forward. So definitely really exciting to watch going forward. Tessmonster, was there any other free agents that you wanted to talk about?
Well, did you say Kikuchi? Yes, I did. And he's off to the Blue Jays. That's another addition to this rotation that's going to probably put them over the top, I think. I mean, you look at that top to bottom, and now there's 5 legitimate arms there. That's going to be a team that's ready to go toe-to-toe with any of these teams in the AL East. I really like that, especially for a guy like Kikuchi, who really kind of wowed everybody last year. He finally emerged as, the guy we thought he was going to be when he came over, and it was fun to watch, and it'll be even more fun to watch him in that tough American League East. That's a strong rotation, and you add a guy like that in your 4th or 5th spot. It's going to be great for them and even better for fantasy, especially when he's going after the Orioles, multiple times in a year.
You mentioned the Blue Jays, and I just have to throw this in as one of the little sneaky signings that the Blue Jays did to wrap this up during spring training, which probably is not going to be one of the last moves, but Tapia to the Blue Jays for Grichuk. I mean, you're talking about a guy with speed, puts up a good average. I think, in that lineup, I think he's going to be sneaky. So I think the Blue Jays, they've made some good moves this offseason. And man, if they don't take that East, I'd be shocked.
Yeah, we've talked about how much we liked the Blue Jays overall and their signings. We talked about how much we liked their starting rotation before that signing and how that their bullpen could even be better than the rotation with kind of the arms that they had back there in some of our previous podcasts. So that just makes them even more dangerous. And I'm definitely, as a Twins fan, looking for them to take down the Yankees and the Rays on that side of it and be the new powerhouse in the AL East there moving forward. But enough of the free agent signs, enough of the real world baseball. Let's jump into our top 300 rankings. We're going to start from the bottom here. Let's dive into kind of your second half, your back end of your draft, the players that you want to look at. We'll dive into who you should be targeting to round out some of the weaknesses in your roster, and also obviously our disagreements on where people are ranked. So let's jump right into that now. And now let's kick it off right away with one of those players that we disagree on, and that's somebody I've been hyping up for all of our podcasts. Ty France. Forever. My guy, my plant the flag this year, and that's Ty France. You want him on your roster, especially in the back half here. I have him ranked at 155. We have a group rank at 187. Tyler, you have him at 229. Explain yourself.
Yeah, I mean, when you're thinking of a roto standpoint, yeah, he definitely puts up the batting average and the on base. But, I mean, this is someone that doesn't steal bases at all. I think the home runs played a little bit more this year than we've actually seen in his past. I mean, I think the power played a little bit more this year than we're going to see. I think I see him more as that 15 home run guy. He is on a team, fortunately, that, he is going to lead the way, with a strong lineup. But I think there's guys in front of him that are a little bit more certainty. He's only proven it 1 year. I mean, San Diego is willing to move on because they didn't see as much in him. And I just don't think he hits enough categories and enough strengths for me to want to rank him higher than that.
you're telling me in the back half of a draft, you don't like a guy who hits 300 and has a chance to go like 90-90 with, you think it's 15 home runs. I think it's going to be about 20. I mean, last spring training, we saw him put out, I think it was 5 to 7 home runs in spring training. So the power can play. I think he's growing into it. It's gone up every year. So I don't think he has a 25 potential, but I think he can get to 20 or stay around that 18 to 20 range. No steals, obviously an issue, but if you're looking at the back half of that draft, there's not too many more people who are going to have as high of a floor as the Ty France is going into. What I think, Tessman, you were there with me at 177. What do you think about him?
This is one of the more interesting players that we might disagree on, just because you can go one way or another, especially when you look at some of the more advanced statistics. I mean, I'm 100% buying in on what you're selling, Nation, in the sense that, you look at some of those exit velocities and, on the surface, he's major league average, but in another sense, when he's not hitting the ball on the ground, his exit velocity is high enough on his line drives and fly balls where it approaches that range in advanced sabermetrics where your batting average, OBP, OPS go off the charts. So he's flirting with that range. I don't know if he ever gets above that range truly, but there's a lot to like there. And especially for a guy that, has consistently posted a higher batting average than expected, and his BABIP follows that trend too. I don't necessarily see a drop off with a lot of other, you look at a lot of other players' BABIP, and if they explode for one season, that's another conversation. But his BABIP, his expected batting average, are consistently above league average, where I think he holds that. So in that sense, in an average league, in an OBP league, he's going to have great value there. I also see what Tyler's talking about when we're talking about, okay, well, what are the counting stats truly going to be? And I think that's the question. I mean, we saw him explode for some home runs that were way higher than anything he had posted previously. So I think that's a fair question, especially for a guy that doesn't have a ton of launch angles. So this is truly that middle range guy, but I'm buying in more than I'm selling, in the sense that he's gonna fill a lot of boxes here.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely someone that I will buy into. I think his ADP is a little overvalued, but I definitely see. I mean, I brought up Tapia early on. I mean, you put yourself in a good lineup and you have value, whether you deserve it or not. You're going to have production with people batting around you with that, level. But I look at someone like Alec Boehm, who I graded a little bit higher than him, who puts up constant high exit velocities, hard hit percentages. And I have to value someone like that a little bit higher. But I'm a huge fan of Ty France. Don't get me wrong, Nation. I know you're high on him. I like him, but if I'm going to take him, I'm going to take him a little bit below his ADP.
Tyler, this one really surprises me, because I remember right after he was traded from the Padres to the Mariners, you were all about him. You were trying to sell me on him so hard, and it kind of baffles me that you rank him where you do. But this is going to be a fun one that we monitor over the year, just to see how well he truly does.
Yeah, this is an interesting player, considering I'm high, Tessmonster's in the middle, Tyler's low, and you could make an argument for him to fall into any of those categories, as we just did. So definitely monitoring that, like Tessmonster said, will be really fun, and definitely going to be something that we go into and debate for the next year upcoming, and monitoring his progress there. But Tessmonster, you had a prospect or a player you want to talk about. Who do you want to bring up here?
I think after the amount of disagreement we just had, I think it might make sense to highlight a player that could outplay his ranking here. So we're going to look at Nick Prado, the first baseman for the Royals. Combined, we've got him at 246. We're all right about the same range. I've got him higher than you guys at 231. You're both in the 250 range. He really intrigues me. I absolutely think this is a guy that's going to be up this year at some point. What we saw from him last year was otherworldly. You talk about the 36 home runs and everything he can do in that lineup, especially for a lineup that has really kind of lacked a solution there since Hosmer left. They've had a platoon of players playing there, like Ryan O'Hearn, and they're nothing special. So I really think if given the opportunity, Prado could come up and mash. And when we're talking about outplaying his ADP, I think this is a guy that could absolutely do it, especially if he's up in the early stages of the season with the kind of home runs he can put up. He's got a good eye at the plate. He posts a respectable batting average where you see a couple more guys in that lineup. We're talking about Bobby Witt coming up, maybe MJ Melendez, and we know Salvi's there. So this lineup could low-key make some noise, I think. And if he's up in that group, I certainly expect him to outplay where we've got him ranked. What do you guys think?
Yeah. I mean, I fully agree. I mean, you look at someone at first base who has sneaky speed. I mean, I'm not talking, he's going to get 15 steals, but you're talking that 5 to 10 range. He puts up good power. I think that batting average, I mean, we saw him regress a little bit in, AAA from AA, but he, the production was still there in AAA and even more so. So I think, we're easily seeing a guy that's 30 plus home runs, 90 plus RBIs, and, probably sitting around that same thing with runs. So I think his ADP is very low. I think he outplays that. And, unfortunately, he's a little bit logjam with Santana playing there and then getting re-signed. So I mean, if they call him up, it's going to probably be in that DH, split and first base role, but I just don't see how they can avoid that. I think there's, with the new changes in the CBT agreement, I think there's a lot to be desired, and I see him up at least playing half the season. So I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a player that, looking at my rankings and looking at our rankings, I think we'd all agree that we probably all have him a little bit too low. You thinking about him being up this year, but he's definitely going to be up next year if he continues on this pace. And a first baseman who's going to give you 90 with 30 plus home runs and a decent average is definitely nothing to balk at this point. So if you're able to scoop him up, I mean, would you say we had him at like in the 200s? I would feel comfortable having him in the 180s there if that's something coming up here. So I think this is definitely something to look at moving forward on that aspect. Tessmonster, was there anything else on Nick you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, I mean, I know Tyler mentioned Carlos Santana, and I guess I have a hard time believing he's going to be a factor, especially, as we get further into the season, just because we've seen consecutive seasons where he's failed to hit, above 214. I mean, a guy who can't hit his weight, we all know what he does with his OBP, and that's nice, but he's not even really hitting for power anymore. The counting stats aren't there, so I mean, I guess in the grand scheme, that's not a big concern for a major league ball club. But, for a 36-year-old guy, I just have a hard time believing that they're going to take playing time away from a prospect that can flirt with 40 home runs in his prime over an aging veteran.
Yeah, especially you're talking about bringing up a couple other prospects with him. That seems like a rebuilding phase for Kansas City and giving people some playing time to get ready for 2023, 2024 going forward on there and being able to learn from a Santana on some kind of plate approach. I mean, Santana was a beast in his prime and can share some knowledge bits and some wisdom with an up-and-coming first baseman there. So it seems like a good situation and somebody that I would be great with drafting a little bit higher. But now to somebody who Tyler.
Yeah, sorry, I'll chime in there. I know you mentioned Carlos Santana might, I mean, you don't spend, over 10 million on a player and just give up on him. So I think that's why I sort of say that, we're probably looking at, Nick Prado playing half the season. I think you got to still, if you're going to spend 10 million, you got to give him a good portion of the season. So I think that's the only, way to devalue Prado is that they spent a lot of money on Santana. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, they shouldn't be relying on this old bat that's irrelevant now.
Yeah, but I think when you're talking about kind of Santana there, when you look at the dynasty aspect of it, losing maybe half a season to some at-bats here and there doesn't change his overall projection if you're trying to look for him in 2023, 2024 and getting into his prime there. So I think where we have him ranked is a little bit too low. I mean, I know me personally, when our rankings updates come out, I think you'll see this person as somebody who jumps up in those rankings. Yeah. And I think we're all kind of on the same page on Nick there. But now let's go to figuring out why Tyler hates John Means. Tyler, what do you think about
that? I have a hard time buying into Baltimore pitchers. And don't get me wrong, they got two great prospects in Grayson Rodriguez and DL Hall. And there's a lot to be desired with the prospects that they have coming up. But, when you look at John Means, yeah, he had a great 2019 season. He regressed in 2020, but we sort of talked about that season. You just got to throw it out the window because you're talking no fans, shortened season. It just was, I don't even like using that really as a factor. But we look at him in 2021, when you compare his first half of the season to his second half of the season. And obviously, I'm throwing a lot of, ifs out here of, is someone using some sticky substance on the ball and is someone not? And then the league comes out mid-season and talks about how, they're going to suspend people if they find it. It just sort of matches up with how his season went. And a low strikeout guy, a good walk rate, but a guy that just overall, I think he was, he had the advantage. I mean, you look at his first half of the season, it's hard not to think that he had some play in that sticky substance because his first half of the season, he was posting, a low or a, mid-2 ERA, and then he boasts over a 4 ERA for the rest of the season. There's just something that really scares me with him that makes me drop him down the rankings. He's not going to get you the wins because he's on a crap team. He's not going to get you the Ks because he's just not a huge K pitcher. And you got to bank off of that wins, or his whip, solely. I just don't think he hits enough categories in Roto for me to be like, yeah, this is the guy I want to get in that 150 to 200 range. He scares me. He just scares me a lot.
That's a very fair concern. And, you brought up some of those first half and second half splits, but I'm looking here at his advanced statistics. Did you guys know in games that John Means won, he was 6-0 last year?
That's a great stat.
Love it.
No, but that's absolutely a real concern. And, going off your sticky substance concerns, you look at the dropping spin rates. His fastball's down over 100, his slider's down almost 200. That's absolutely a concern. And, maybe it was something else going on. Maybe it was arm fatigue. I'm not going to accuse a guy that hasn't been caught of doing it, but it is suspicious. So I'll give you that. I guess my rationale for ranking him where he's at, he's a guy who's in his prime. He's shown the ability to do it. You say low strikeouts, but he still flirts with that 9 number, a K an inning. It's something I'm willing to go after. The wins are definitely a concern. We saw his whip go up in the second half last year, but it's also a whip that's around 1 over the course of the year. So there's a lot of things to like outside of that. And we also saw his BABIP increase last year. So I'm also inclined to believe that was a factor as well. All concerns aside, players in a similar range, I might opt to go in a different direction, but I think I've got him comfortably ranked based on upside, and I'm willing to buy in that if I'm taking Means in this range.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on too, we didn't mention, so we have him at a combined 170. Me and the Tessmonster have him at 154 each, and Tyler has him up at 204 for those overall rankings. And I think thinking about kind of that whip is one of the big deals on what he's going to bring to your team, especially from a starting pitcher who's going to eat up a bunch of innings, even if he doesn't get those wins. But if you have quality starts, that might jump him up to the rankings there a little bit. So it's going to depend on kind of what you're looking for when you're filling out the rest of your roster on that side of it. But Tyler, is there anything you wanted to touch on that the Tessmonster said?
Yeah, I mentioned I came from a point standpoint and sort of how I have that mindset, and I'm trying to switch over to that Roto mindset, but it's hard not to sit here and compare someone that threw, a similar amount of innings as Jameson of the Yankees. And from a point standpoint, they were almost spot on, put up around 300 points for that season, depending on how your scoring goes. But there's just, Nick or Tessmonster brought up, his whip. That is something that is to be loved. That's a category he's going to help you with. But there's just so many categories here. It's just like, if he's in your top 5, maybe top 4 pitchers, do you love it? I don't. So it's like, I just got to move him down a little bit, maybe take more of a gamble on a younger pitcher that might be able to be more, productive. Like, let's just say a Hunter Green that is going to have a high K rate, even though he's going to be pitching on a team that doesn't have really an offense to put out there now after all their trades. But I just think I'm willing to sacrifice and take more of a gamble on someone that might hit more categories. So I think that's the only reason I might rank him a little bit lower.
Yeah, I think that kind of goes down to really what we're talking about kind of in the back half of the draft too, like you mentioned, is how you're going to fill out your team. If you went in with some of those high upside players in the top half of your draft, getting a guy who has a safe floor, kind of knowing what you're getting from him might be the way to go here. If you have the safe top, you might want to go again for Hunter Green to be able to excel on that side of it. So just being able to fill out kind of your roster and the overall aspect of a dynasty league leaves some room for disagreement here with John Means, as we had. And now let's jump into Dalton Varshall, somebody who we all rank pretty similar, and we're all kind of higher than the consensus on here. We have him ranked overall at 153, with all of us being within about 10 of that ranking. Tessmonster, why don't you kick us off on why people should buy into Dalton Varshall here?
It's nice to agree, guys, and let's just take this moment to appreciate it because it doesn't happen often. Honestly, a ton of his value, and I think we'll all agree, comes from the ability to have that catcher position on his profile. Saw him play a mix of catcher and outfield last year, but honestly, a ton of his value is tied to having that catcher eligibility. You're talking about a guy who actually swipes bags, and probably somebody who can swipe in the area of 15 this year, but somebody who is projected currently as, a starting outfielder for a shaky Diamondbacks team. If you're in a dynasty league, I don't know what that does for you long-term. You're probably hoping that he just maintains that eligibility. And depending on your league, I mean, Nation and I have both seen, questions from fans saying, oh, well, what if Mookie Betts is second base eligible? Well, he hasn't been second base eligible in a hot minute in most leagues, but some leagues do allow that. So that catcher position really holds the value here. 15 steals, if you're counting on 20 home runs, I think that's safe. But we saw that OPS take off last year. Honestly, the exit velocity, the barrel rate, they're both promising for me enough, along with the shrinking strikeout rate, where this is something I'm going to buy into. And I think I'm not alone here in thinking that he's going to explode this year, especially for somebody who can play that catcher position. Probably reasonably rank him in that top 8 at the end of the year for what he puts out.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. 15 stolen bases is a real possibility for him. He put up 11 home runs across 95 games this last year, but I think 15 to 20 is easily doable for him. I mean, unfortunately, he plays on a bad team, but I don't think that's going to hold him down, maybe besides those runs in RBIs. But, his strikeout to walk ratio improved big time. I think that's something that's going to continue to grow. I think you said you had him in your top 8. Man, it's just, I definitely missed on him. I mean, we looked at last year and I just didn't even factor this guy in, but he's finally coming into his own. And we look at some of his, numbers in the, double A, triple A, even, high A ball. He proved that he could do this. And it's hard not to think we have him around that 150 ranking that, it's easily doable. If you're looking at a 2-catcher league too, this is a stud. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, it's one of those things we've touched on of finding ways to get steals that aren't from those. If you don't have some of those elite guys getting you 30 plus on here, if he's going to come in at the catcher position and get you at least 10, I mean, he had 280 at bats last year and stole 6 bases. If he gets to the 450, 500 at bats while he plays outfield and catcher this year and finds some time to DH, there's no reason to think that he's not going to get 10 plus to that 15 range and then increase those home runs to 15. So if you're looking at a 15-15 catcher, that is a lot of value there, especially when he's not taking your batting average or your on-base percentage, and then being able to come in and get you above average counting stats as a catcher. I think that is incredible value, especially when you're looking at a 2-catcher league, maybe needing to get him into the top 5 when you're looking at that roto format and being able to get some of those stolen bases if you haven't filled out a complete 5-tool player with one of your first 2 rounds that you picked on there. So Varshall, especially in a Dynasty league, I love him if he can keep his catcher eligibility. I'll be definitely really interested, as Tessmonster mentioned, if he's able to keep that this year and move forward and catch enough as he's getting kind of pushed into the outfield to be able to keep that eligibility and keep his ranking this high. Anything else you wanted to mention on him, Tessmonster?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned some of the counting stats that we're counting on. I guess the interesting caveat here, you mentioned that, he's not going to tank your average in OBP. We've seen him make some strides in that area. At present, he's not great. I mean, you look at a 250 average and a 320 OBP, that's not going to wow anybody. Neither is a 750 OPS if that's your 5th category. But I think we're all on the same page that we expect that to continue to rise. He's not going to be a Keibert Ruiz with the batting average. He's not going to draw a ton of walks, but we expect it to improve, where I don't think you should be counting on a 250, 320 batting average OBP line either.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Keibert Ruiz, because that's actually who, when you talk about these catchers coming into a full season in 2022, those are the comparisons. Varshall or Keibert Ruiz, who do you take? And if you're talking a points league, you might be a little bit more safe with a Keibert Ruiz, but in a roto, the upside of Varshall with those stills and his power potential, I think we have him like 50 spots, higher than Ruiz, if not maybe close to that. But yeah, there's a lot to be desired there, and I couldn't agree. I mean, Nation, you threw out that, the outfield eligibility. I almost hope he just hits the minimum to keep catcher eligibility, because this is going to allow him to play a lot more games than your average catcher. So that makes him even more valuable in my mind.
100%. If he can go to the outfield, but keeping that catcher eligibility just so he can get up to 500 plus at-bats a year will do immense things to him being able to build up those counting stats, get those steals for you. And when I'm saying not tank your average or on base on there, as Tessmonster mentioned, like it's not a great on either of those right now. But when you compare that to kind of those catchers when you drop out of that top 10 range, who are really going to hurt you across the board, I think when you're looking at kind of a slightly below average in both of those, but being at the catcher position really helps being able to kind of have that safe floor, what you're looking for going forward with Varshall.
And he was putting up near a 300 average in the minors, so maybe there's more to be had there.
Yeah, and in a Dynasty format, that's definitely something to look at, and everyone who owns shares of him can cross their fingers that he gets up to that. Even if he gets a 270 average, 275 average this year, those counting stats are going to go up, and he's going to be extremely valuable, making a case for a top 5 catcher overall this year on that side of it. But now let's go to another catcher who was kind of a gem a few years ago as a catcher prospect and has fallen out of favor, especially from Tyler here. Tyler, tell us, Joey Bart, you have him ranked at 293. We have him ranked at 258 combined. Why do you hate him, and why should people avoid him?
Ah, man, 2 years ago, you would have talked about Joey Bart, and I've been like, this is the Adley Rutschman of 2020. I mean, like, oh, this is your guy. This is who you need. I mean, we all knew Buster Posey was going to slow him down a little bit. And don't get me wrong, with Buster Posey retiring, the window is open for Joey Bart. But, I mean, you look at his minor league numbers, yeah, he put up good batting average, but his first half of the season in minor leagues, he struggled big time, and his power didn't really play. He's got no, speed factor to even consider. He came up to the majors and struggled across, 111 plate appearances. I just think that this is someone that we are pretty far out on. I think it's going to take him even another year or two to be actually fantasy relevant. And to be honest, I had a hard time putting him in my top 300. So I just, gambling on a player like an MJ Melendez that might not even play as much as Joey Bart, I think there's a lot more value to that in my mind.
Yeah, this is another one I struggled to rank too. Ultimately, I ended up putting him at 264, and my logic here was, okay, well, he's a starting catcher. He's got nobody taking away, half the starts even behind the plate. So you're going to get a reliable guy that's back there every day. And we've seen glimmers of hope in the minors. We've never seen it at the major league level, but we've seen him be a productive 280 bat in the minor leagues, where if he can approach that in a playoff team from last year, I think we all expect San Francisco to regress a bit, but if he can do that and the other pieces of the lineup are working, I think there's certainly upside there. And that was my logic here. You plug a guy who can hit 280. I'm not saying he will. Maybe he only hits 250, 260 this year. And I don't think we're ever going to see the power potential that he showcased, when he was at Georgia Tech or anything like that. But, you factor in, okay, let's call it 10 to 15 home runs. Let's call it 60 to 70 in the counting stats. It's a reasonably safe catcher in the sense that a lot of guys that you're taking this late just aren't fantasy relevant either. You look at our Ryan Jeffers for Minnesota, for instance, and I'd rather have a Joey Bart, I guess. So that's my logic here. I like him a little bit better than Tyler, I guess, in only the sense that there's upside. He hasn't played a ton at the major league level. He hasn't played a ton at the minor league level either, but that's neither here nor there. There's upside here. I'm willing to put a little bit of stock in that. That's why I've got him 30 spots ahead of you.
And I look like the crazy one here. I have him at 217, and here I thought I was pretty low on him. A little bit I know who my counterparts were going to rank him. I think I have him ranked that high. It's kind of on the Tessmonsters train of he's going to be the starting catcher. He's young. He's going to be able to grow, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Me picking Ruiz over him years ago in our Dynasty draft looks really great to me right now. But I just think being able to have a starting catcher who's going to be there, who's going to get you those counting stats, it's a very safe floor if you haven't drafted a catcher. If he's your first catcher you draft down in the 200s, he's going to play every day. He can grow, and that there is maybe a little bit of glimmer of hope, even though I'm not very high on him either. I think it's just more of the playing time at the catcher position and knowing that he's going to be able to put up some of those counting stats for you. Being there is why I have him ranked higher than that. But again, I'm not very high on him. I wouldn't be happy if he was my first catcher. I wouldn't be happy really if he's on my team. I think I would find value somewhere else. But I think there's a very safe floor on having a young catcher who's going to be catching every day with no competition, even coming up from the minors for him. Tyler, what do you think about that?
You guys sort of talk about him being the starting catcher and not having competition, but, I think that there was a lot of success in the Giants pitching last year. And, as great as Buster Posey was offensively, he barely caught half the games last year. And I think, Kurt caught 77 games, I think, roughly last year. I think Kurt Casale is going to come in and probably, if I had to bet, I think he's going to catch more than Joey Bart. I just think, you got a guy that has been back there catching, DeSclafani and some other pitchers. If I'm a betting man, I think the Giants are going to take the safe approach and let him lead the way until Joey Bart can prove it offensively. So I think that's where my big concern comes in is, what they decide to do there. But if he can pan out and do what he did in the minors, I'm going to be proven wrong pretty quickly.
Yeah, I don't think any of us are super high on him, and I don't think any of us are really going to have any shares of him going into this year or future years, especially in Dynasty. But I do think there is some of a safe floor there with no other real catching prospects coming up in the minors that are going to challenge him. Like you mentioned, I think that's a good point you mentioned on him maybe not being able to catch every day or even getting the bulk share of catcher this year with the Giants here. But the future seems like it's laid out for him, but I guess only time will tell with Joey Bart here. And now Tessmonster, we're done with Joey Bart here. Is there anybody you want to bring up?
Yeah, I might need you guys to talk me off the ledge here because I seem to be way far off base compared to you guys. I've got Mr. Anthony Rizzo, Mr. New York himself. We've got him combined at 264. I've got him down in the 338 range versus you guys in the 220s. What am I missing here? I'm seeing a guy who continues to decline over the last 2 years. We've seen his OPS go in the tank. He can barely hit 250 anymore. And when you take a look at the advanced metrics, I mean, he's just not doing it with the advanced metrics anymore. We've seen his walk rate drop. What do you guys like here? Because I'm seeing the end here, and I'm not seeing anything worth rostering.
Yeah, Tessmonster, when you compare some of the guys we have in that 250 range, which is where, roughly we're ranking him, you're talking about 20 plus home runs. You're talking about a 70 RBI, 70 runs, and someone with a great K to walk ratio, because he's notorious for, walking and, not striking out a ton. There's a lot to be desired. And now he's re-signed with the Yankees as a lefty with a short porch. You have to believe, even with him declining, that short porch is going to play into his power production. And in a lineup that has some, potential to still put up good, runs, I have a hard time believing he's not going to put up 20 plus home runs, 70 plus RBIs, 70 plus runs, and a 250 average. And with his K to walk ratio, his, plate discipline, I don't see it for the next 3 years, not, playing into a big factor for his success. So, his age and his decline, I completely understand that, because it's clear as day. But I just think he signed with the right team to have him still have, 2 to 3 years of success. So I just can't, in a roto mindset where he hits all the categories besides stolen bases. And even then he could still probably get, another 6 stolen bases at a position that, not many people steal bases. I still think there's a lot to be desired.
I think I'm buying into Tyler's side here. Obviously, we have him ranked very similar. It's the lineup he's a part of. It's that short porch. It's being able to not rely on him to be the Anthony Rizzo of the elite Cubs days, but to be a guy who's going to put up 25 home runs, get on base, and be a part of a Yankees lineup that he should have no problem putting up 75, or even going higher than that. Even with his declining numbers, you're not looking at him to be a part of your team for 8 to 10 years. I mean, if you're drafting him in this range, you're looking at a veteran who can shore up a spot because you have some of that minor league talent. You're going to draft some minors to come up at that first base side. So I think it's a safe place to be able to generate some productivity, especially when you think of them getting rid of a Luke Voit and being like, hey, yeah, we believe in Rizzo. He's going to be our guy here for the season and for the upcoming future. So I think that's where, if you're looking at 250 range and you have somebody like a Andrew Benintendi in there, like I see no problem having Anthony Rizzo right alongside of him, Tessmonster.
Yeah, I understand what you guys are saying, but at the same time, I mean, we saw his power numbers go down in Yankee Stadium last year. I mean, his slugging percentage, his isolated power were both lower there than in Chicago. So I guess I don't know how to make heads or tails of that. And so when we're talking about guys in that 264 range, I see a lot of guys I like a lot more below him. I mean, looking at a prospect like a Nick York or a Colton Wong who can give me a few steals. When I'm looking at first base and, I'm seeing a guy who's only going to give me 15 to 20 home runs, a mediocre average, a mediocre OBP these days, I'm just not sure what I'm buying into. And I guess that's why I've got him quite a bit lower.
I completely understand that, but I just, you look at, some of the guys we have ranked around there, like a Mike Yastrzemski, whose average fell off, his power fell off, or even, a Hunter Renfroe, which is a huge gamble, even though he's shifted to Milwaukee. It's just Anthony Rizzo still has that certainty and a good lineup to continue his 20 plus home runs, and his power production is overall, putting up an 800 OPS still would be a very productive year for him. I don't have the heart to say that he is, above someone like a Mark Canha or someone. I have to just from a production standpoint and projectability that he's going to still make it happen in New York. So to not put him in that 250 range, I just think would be doing him a disservice. So age doesn't play a factor here. He still has 3 years left in my mind.
In my mind, I'm looking at Rizzo, and I'm wondering if you take the name away from him and you say in the 250 range, you're going to get a guy who's going to go 75, maybe 22, 75, and get you a handful of steals with a mediocre OPS. Would that, if you take that name away, you get rid of what he was, that seems like a stat line that'd be fine to draft in that 250 range, Tessmonster. I mean, I guess you're more focused on his declining stats and thinking it's going to keep going down even farther than this. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in the grand scheme, I see a guy like Miguel Sano, who we have down at 293, and I guess I feel like somebody like him, I'm more willing to gamble on. Even with his swing and miss numbers, that doesn't really matter much in Roto. We're talking about a guy who's going to get you that 30 home runs with the counting stats. So I see somebody like that 30 spots later, and I guess I'm not seeing what I'm missing here.
I guess only time will tell. This will be definitely one that Tessmonster will either bite the bullet on halfway through the season, or everyone else in baseball besides Tessmonster playing fantasy baseball will wonder what Tessmonster was seeing ahead of time, and as he gets to raise the flag saying he was correct here.
Well, am I smelling a shot bet here? I mean, what do I got to do? Call it an 800 OPS? You guys take the over?
I will take that bet, because I think with the Yankees, his exit velocity was, one of his highest in the last 6 years this year. I'm willing to take that shot bet with you, and I'll throw 2 shots on there.
Nation?
I'll be in there with you.
All right, we got a buyer, bartender. Put him on the board.
And now let's make our way over to somebody who we all have ranked eerily similar, 193 combined. We're all within 4 of that, and that's going to be Jack Leiter. I want to make the case that we don't have him ranked high enough. I'm looking at some people that we have ranked above him in that range, looking at like a Nick Lodolo, or even something like a Jared Duran or a Noah Syndergaard. We have a Strasburg above him. I think of the number 1 pick here, looking at kind of his projection in a dynasty thing, I think we have him too low here. Tessmonster, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about him at length, obviously, in the podcast about prospects, and there's a lot to like here. I mean, we're talking about the prototypical modern day power pitcher. You've got a guy with four solid pitches, some of them plus offerings. He's a workhorse in the sense that, he's gonna be a bulldog on the mound. He's gonna go after you. We've had some questions about the control, like we mentioned a couple episodes ago. But ultimately, we're seeing a guy here who can lead a rotation, and that's not something you can say about anybody in Texas right now. So there's that. As much as Tyler loves Spencer Howard, Jack Leiter is going to be the guy. He's gonna give you the K per 9. He's going to give you the ERA. He's going to give you the WHIP. The one question I do have is the walks per 9 affecting the WHIP. But we've seen him be effective enough to not see that be as much of a factor to date. Also, with some of the command issues, I worry about how deep he's going to go into games to get you the wins. But when you're counting on 5 to 6 innings from most pitchers these days, I guess I'm going to chalk it up to a wash. He's another guy, like we've talked about. I can see him outplaying that, ranking right now, especially as we get further into the season and his proximity to the majors gets closer.
Yeah, I agree with you pretty much on everything you said. I think there's 2 pitchers that I have ranked above him that might raise some questions, and Nick Lodolo and then Hunter Green. But when I actually compare him to those 2, you're talking about proximity. Hunter Green, I think, has a spot in the rotation. I think Nick Lodolo is going to easily, make his way up to the majors this year and, be up next year. I think there's a little bit more certainty and, between control that he has had and success he's had in the minors. I think there's just a little bit more of a guarantee at this early on in Leiter's career. Potential for Leiter is definitely there, but to take him, in a draft before those 2, when you're getting a little bit more of a certainty from those 2, I think I have him so close in the rankings. I mean, we're talking 10 spots for Lodolo and, 15 spots for Green. So it's not like I have him that far off, but I just think, coming out of college, he could easily be the ace for Texas, but we got to see what he's going to do. Maybe double A he starts out this year, but I just think there's, a little bit more to prove for me to want to rank him higher yet.
I think that one of the big question marks I have, and we're all on the same page in here, of Noah Syndergaard being at 173 with all the question marks that he has. That you're looking at almost 2 rounds of taking a Syndergaard with, I can't remember the last time that he pitched or pitched super effectively. I mean, his upside, but he hasn't pitched, so he's up there in age now. I'm questioning myself on why I ranked lighter behind Noah here, and my first rankings update will definitely be reflecting that. Tessmonster, what do you think on that comparison of those two players?
I mean, Syndergaard, we've seen him do it, and the injuries have obviously slowed him. So I think that's a factor. And we've seen him pitch at a high enough level where, I can't say that I regret putting him where I've got him, because if he's on his game, 150 innings of 11K per 9, a respectable, mid-3s ERA, decent whip. I mean, that's still a pretty solid arm. So where we've got Syndergaard at 171, I don't necessarily hate it. You might, adjust that accordingly, but I think Syndergaard is in a comfortable place for me, especially when we look at an Angels team that should be improved this year, certainly from a lineup standpoint of being healthy. I think that's a factor for me as well, if you're chalking it up to wins or what have you. So there's a lot of pitchers in this same range, and we talked about John Means, who we have one spot above Syndergaard. So, there's just enough question marks with all the guys in this kind of range. I mean, you look at Hyunjin Ryu at 160, who kind of fell off the face of the earth last year. I mean, there's plenty of questions in this range. And so you pick your poison. I mean, there's enough reasons to like each of these guys, whether you're planning on a rebound, if you're expecting a prospect to emerge, go with your gut.
Man, I have so much to digest there, Tessmonster, from what you said. Sounded like you put the Angels in the World Series, and I'm here for it because as an Angels fan,
that's a long way to go from what the hell I just said.
Just saying, I think if I, mix your words enough, that's what you said. So I think I'm going to take it.
Maybe I was talking too fast for you, but I want some of what you're smoking. That's what you heard.
That shot's really getting to your head that you took at the beginning of the podcast.
The tequila will do that, but I have to say, you guys ranked John Means higher than I did. Noah Syndergaard, to me, a healthy Noah Syndergaard at 150 innings with his K rate, his good walk rate, and his career ERA, a healthy Noah Syndergaard is elite. Now, obviously, we haven't seen that since 2019, and even 2019 was his worst year. But we're talking about a guy with elite stuff on an offense that should give him enough run production to help his win category. His K category is going to be good. His whip category is good. I just think he hits enough of the boxes to say, you've had it, a couple years off, but your stuff is that elite that I still can't take it away from you. I mean, I look at someone like Clevenger that we have ranked up there, and he's another guy that, we have, around that 187 range. It's enough to say that, they just have that kind of stuff to say, Jack Leiter, are you really above both, Clevenger and Syndergaard to say that you're better than them at this point? Yeah, he's got elite stuff, but what they can do for your team for the next 3 years, if healthy, is going to help you a lot more.
Yeah, I understand all of what you're saying. There's a lot to digest, especially when you're looking at kind of the back half of your draft. That's really kind of what we're getting into, is how you're going to fill out your lineup. And gambling on a Syndergaard, I love that you brought up a Clevenger too. I mean, you got some of these guys who've proven it, but you haven't seen them pitch in a while. So you're trying to wonder if they still have it, which is kind of the same thing with Leiter. You've seen him have it in college, and you're wondering if he has it in the majors. So there's definitely something to be said there on kind of how you're going to fill out your lineup, what you're looking for kind of in the back half of your rotation. But I know when I'm looking at kind of my prospect draft board, Leiter's right up there at the top for starting pitchers. And I think having him down at the 190s is a little bit too low for me. So I'm definitely excited to see where he ranks for me personally when we put out our updated rankings. at the beginning of our baseball year this year. So it'll be something to watch him progress, especially there's definitely a lot of room for a starting pitcher to be there in that Texas organization with all the money they put into offense.
Okay, enough about Jack Leiter. I want to talk about somebody who we have ranked lower. That's Ranger Suarez. I've mentioned before, he absolutely willed me to a title last year. And it's no surprise with what he did after he converted from a reliever to a starter last year. He's got a fairly straightforward arsenal, but as an extreme ground ball pitcher, with the defense that he's got behind him now, he's got a lot of upside there, especially for a guy who's ticked up his whiff rate, who's become a stronger starting pitcher. We saw him, get stretched out in a hurry last year, going from 4 innings and a start in August to a complete game in September. So this is a guy I really like, especially heading into this year. He's still a younger guy. He's a guy who can get you the strikeouts. He's going to have a lower whip. He's got a lower ERA. I mean, he's not going to have the one range ERA like he had last year. That's unreasonable. But for somebody who can throw up a 3 ERA in that 3 spot behind a Zach Wheeler, behind an Aaron Nola, this is a guy I love a lot, especially for where his ADP is at right now. We were just in a draft. Nation and I were just in a satellite league draft where his ADP is, down in the 180s, and we've got him ranked a little bit lower, obviously for dynasty purposes. But for 1 year, for multiple years, this is a guy I think can reasonably outplay where we've got him ranked by a long shot. I've got him ranked a little bit above you guys. What do you guys think about his overall long-term view?
Yeah, I mean, you sort of opened my eyes to him this last year. I mean, I didn't think there was much to be desired there. I didn't think he had the K rate, to really produce as a starter in a productive standpoint in a points league, let alone to hit categories in a roto league. But he sort of, proved me wrong. He, 106 innings, even only starting 12 games. I mean, that was pretty impressive. And I think, if this guy throws 150 innings, even with a low 3 ERA, which I think is probably projecting him a little higher than I would, it's still very impressive. But I see him, a mid 3 to maybe probably around that mid to high 3s. But if he can sit around that 9K per 9, I mean, where we have him projected, I mean, I might even be willing to move him up a little bit more. I think this is a sneaky still that late in the draft, and he's still super young. So if you're in a dynasty standpoint, you're going to have him for a while. So, yeah, this is a sneaky still.
Yeah, it's one thing that Tessmonster didn't mention is we have him combined at 248 here. Tessmonster has him well above all of us at 211, with me and Tyler having him at 271 and 264. So Tessmonster really likes Ranger Suarez here, and I get the upside. I think there's some pitchers in that 211 range that I like a little bit more. I guess I'm still looking to be bought in a little bit more. Tessmonster, why should I guess, buy into him even more than I am currently?
I mean, for a starting pitcher, he doesn't have great spin rate, but he does have a great whiff rate. I mean, we saw above 20% whiff rate on all 4 of his pitches last year, which is pretty exciting to think about, especially when you look at a changeup at the 40% and a slider at 41%. He can go after lefties. He can go after righties. He's not a hard thrower, but he can still put that up. And when you look at it in terms of whip, we're looking at a guy who in the major leagues has never had a walk per 9 above 3, and in the minor leagues he was just as good. The one thing I'll be looking to see if he can maintain is that strikeout rate. Obviously at 9.1 last year, that's something we've only seen in his minor leagues in 1 year. So I'll be looking to see if that's sustainable. But when you look at a whiff rate like that, it's hard not to think that he can't. Obviously hitters adjust over the course of a year. But when we're talking about an extreme ground ball pitcher, it's not like guys are going to be able to lift it into the stands with ease either, especially since he was so good at locating that last year. So this is something that I'm looking for leading the charge. I mean, even if he can't sustain the elite level K per 9, well, 9 per 9 isn't elite, but strong K rate. If he can't sustain, if he drops down to 7, drops down to 8, with a high ground ball rate. I'm just not seeing the ERA inflating to some of the other levels that we see with guys who rely on the fastball so much.
I hear elite ground ball rate, and all I can think about is a Brandon Webb from back in the day.
Talk dirty to me.
That'll really get me going. Talk dirty to me.
That'll get your crank going.
Somebody has to. But in this day and age, I feel like that's a little bit hard to sustain of having an elite ground ball rate translating kind of into elite overall stats. That's something I'm going to look forward to seeing him progress. I mean, he had an elite year last year while he was up. He saw that in 2019 as well, being pretty well in their team as well. But it's definitely somebody to look forward to. I know according to the ADP this year, as Tessmonster pointed out, we're all a little bit higher on him than the ADP is going. There's a lot of people who are pretty high on him. And me and Tyler definitely down the train compared to the 190, 180 that he's going right now. But definitely if he can continue it, it'll be something to keep touching on and find himself rising up the rankings really quick this year as we update them. But now somebody that needs really no introduction if you're looking at the Dynasty world, and that's going to be O'Neil Cruz and all the things that he brings to the table. We have him at 155 combined. We're all within about 10 of that range. Tyler, you have all the shares of him. Let us know why you bought all of them and why you expect them to just rise.
Yeah, I mean, between, 2018, 2019, he showed a good, K to walk ratio. He put up a good batting average. He showed decent power. He's always had that speed to, show that he can, in a roto league, hit all categories. And now in a Pittsburgh team, with, limited bats there besides Brian Reynolds, he's showing that he's going to take over that shortstop position. So I think his window is open. And if you're looking for, at taking a catcher, later, or not a catcher, a shortstop, my bad. We talk about so many. We talk about
catcher on his mind.
Yeah, catcher. There's too many catchers on my mind here. But a shortstop this late on, I mean, you can get a steal and not take one of the top 5 shortstops. You can get a steal here that's going to hit many categories that a lot of shortstops won't hit. I think we see easily 15 to 20 stolen bases. I think we see a 280 plus average and 15 to 20 home runs. So, if you're looking at someone that's going to hit all your categories and be very balanced, I just think this, and not to even touch on his minor leagues, he was putting up one of the highest exit velos for all the minor leagues between double and triple A. He was over 91 miles per hour. So he has that, that swing that's going to really project to put up a high OPS. So I just think, this is someone that's going to convert to the MLB very easily. He might not put up the RBIs due to the team he's on, but the run score, the stolen bases, the average, the OBP, OPS, I mean, depending on what categories you have, he's going to do it all. So I'm buying all the shares of O'Neil Cruz right now.
This is a really exciting player, and I know when Tyler and I met when baseball came back, O'Neil Cruz was my favorite in the National League to win Rookie of the Year. And when you dig into the numbers, it's really easy to see why. Tyler highlighted a lot of them. I actually like him for 20-plus home runs and steals this year, which is really crazy when you're talking about a shortstop that stands 6'7". There's just a ton to love, other than the fact that he doesn't draw a ton of walks. But that's not going to stop me from taking a guy like this, in the middle of the draft. Nation talked about how we've all got him in that 150 range, and it's easy to see why when you're talking about 20, a 280 average. And, if he gets into 150 games this year, we're talking about, a run production that can approach 80 runs in a bad lineup, RBI production that's probably somewhere in the 70 range. There's just a ton to love, especially when you compare him to the ADP. And you talked about that exit velocity. I remember watching that first home run he hit against Cincinnati last year, change up below the knees, and he golfs it out at 118 miles an hour, which is just insane. So there's a ton to love here. Sky is the ceiling for this guy. If you didn't have all the shares, I'd be buying him.
Well, yeah, Tessmonster, I think you mentioned he's 6'7", and he's 210 right now. I think there's a lot that can grow into, that he can be grow into a big frame when you're looking at. You don't see too many hitters at 6'7" and not putting up 20+ home runs. So I think this year that seems very reasonable. When you look into his future, you look 3-4 years from now, maybe he doesn't stay at shortstop as he gets a little bit bigger and not quite nimble on his feet, moves over to third or something. But being able to grow and look at his projection for 3 to 4 years from now with what is an elite power and speed combination, that is, I mean, the ceiling is the height for him as being one of those top 5 shortstops, competing with, that Trey Turner, those Fernando Tatises, to be in the first round, the second round coming up in 3 to 4 years from now. And I know me and you went and have been targeting him in our drafts this year, and have got him, looking to get him in our next draft. So it'll be definitely really exciting to see what he can do. And granted, he's there. There's no competition really for him for playing time. So it's gonna be really exciting to see what he does this year and moving forward. Tyler, any last thoughts on your guy?
Not much. I have to end my little tidbits on these players we're going to touch by disagreeing with Nick. 2021 between AA and AAA in 69 games, he had 28 walks and 69 Ks. So I think that, he doesn't walk much. I think that K to walk ratio is going to play well in the minors. And I think that's underplayed. I think, we saw him early on at the age of 18 and 19 striking out quite a bit. I think that's going to be much improved upon. So I think that OBP is going to play very well. So look to see, someone that is going to walk a little bit more with his speed to play into his stolen bases.
Talk dirty to me.
Definitely love to see what he has going on this year. It'll be really fun to continue to watch. But that's going to round out our kind of back half of your draft for our top 300 prospects. And now let's go into kind of our DLR league. That's about to start. Our draft is coming up next week. Really excited to have that happen. Tyler kicked that off. He's got that running. Tyler, why don't you let us know about the DLR league and let us know what you have coming up here?
Yeah, so we're doing a 12-team Roto 5x5 league, daily league, with all the riders in our league plus some random people. So it's going to be exciting to, for us riders to sit here and do a draft with people that, we don't really know, and see, how they can take their minds and sort of challenge us to see if they actually know what they're doing, or if we just have that edge on them. So I'm excited to see with this DLR league to see where that goes. I'm going to be excited after that to do some podcasts to talk about a draft recap and about, where teams are shaping up and good moves that were made to help teams that might take the advantage early on in the season. So as far as the DLR league, that's what I have going on there. I'm finishing my boom and bust articles in my top 10 prospects that you haven't heard of. So look for me on Reddit. My title is FART0263. That's FART0263. I'm also on Twitter, so feel free, hit me up. And if you are interested in joining the DLR, fantasy league in the future, feel free, reach out to us on Dynasty Locker Room. There's a forum to really reach out and, see if we can get you in one of our leagues moving forward.
Yeah, it's definitely really exciting. I know we've hyped it up a lot, and now that it's here, it'll be really fun to interact with the people in a league who go back and forth with us on Reddit, go back and forth with us on Twitter, talking about who we have too high, too low, and to see how everything plays out there, and be able to bring some of those people onto the podcast who are doing well, who have made some great moves, to talk about kind of their insights, what they were thinking about, and highlight some of the members of the community on that side of it, which will be definitely a lot of fun. Tessmonster, what do you got going on here?
Yeah, you guys touched on that DLR league. I'm excited to pull a Bull Durham on you guys, announce my presence with authority. So I'm really excited to take first place, leave you guys in the dust, and there's just going to be no hope for you guys come August. In terms of content, we've wrapped up a lot of the prospect talk. So we're going to be moving on to actual baseball content at the major league level, at least on my end. Hockey season's coming to an end, so we're going to be looking at some guys that you should be looking at rostering down the stretch here. Nation and I are going to be jumping on the hockey podcast here pretty quick, talking about who you should be looking at for your playoff run. Who are guys that have a matchup advantage in multiple weeks, guys who play, 5 games instead of 2. So we're going to be diving into that and looking at stuff to round out your fantasy hockey season. And obviously, it's rookie time in fantasy football. So it's one of the magical times of the year for fantasy football. Going to be diving into some rookie content. Maybe we'll get into some mock drafts, some rookie rankings. So it'll be fun to see how that all shakes out. Anything that I write, you can find me DLR Tessmonster, Twitter, Reddit, also right here at the Dynasty Locker Room.
I do like that you brought up the fantasy football rookies and the rookie in the NFL draft coming up, because you just remind me again that I have the number 1 overall pick thanks to Tyler and his magical lottery for me. So definitely looking forward to that, and definitely looking forward to that hockey podcast because of COVID and those canceled games. There are some imbalanced schedules coming up for your fantasy hockey playoffs. So it'll be really fun to dive into that and help everyone there. But looking forward to baseball. We'll definitely dive into a lot of unique player profiles. Some of these people we've highlighted, some of them that we didn't highlight on the podcast that we want to bring attention to, telling you why to draft them and moving forward. And you'll find my articles there coming up at the Dynasty Locker Room. You can always find me, Nation DLR, at Twitter, on Reddit. Excited to interact with everyone there. Tell Tyler on Reddit and Twitter why Ty France should be drafted. And until next time, you know where to find us.